So I've never really been good at coloring in the lines, as you can see here. I decided to opt out of the adult coloring book for now and trying to do my own design that I can have a bit more control over. So to quickly circle back to the point of this video, which is me trying to learn how to use art markers. I saw a Jazza video where he was like, copics are dead, and I was always priced out of copics. It seemed silly to spend so much money on an art material that I don't even know if I can use well. And I guess the title is misleading because this isn't my first time trying to use art markers. I guess this is my first time trying to use good art markers. So I thought, you know what, we're going away for the long weekend, why not bring some art markers, some adult coloring books, which we haven't really touched because
We just haven't really had the time.
So I realized pretty early on that my initial idea of going one color per name wasn't really going to work, and so I decided that I was going to just try to freestyle some fills. And it's really easy with markers because you can just like overlay colors on top of each other and get some really interesting effects. The last thing I love doing is going over with a white gel pen to add some of those highlights, and I feel like it really helps the letters pop. For the next exercise in trying to teach myself how to use these markers, I've got an adult coloring book that I picked up over Christmas. It is a bunch of cats in hats, and I was like, how can you not love this book? So anyway, I feel like you can really tell that I don't really know what I'm doing at this point. I feel like an experienced marker artist would be like, what's happening here? But I'm just kind of throwing colors around and hoping that things blend well. So I'm moving on to the first image of the book, which I skipped over because the second image was a bit more interesting. I like the idea of doing this book chronologically. That way, if someone were to look through the book, it's a bit more of a sequence and it maybe tells a bit of a story in terms of progression. So I feel like I'm struggling with this image a bit more just because there's a bit more open space, and I'm like, how do I fill in all these open spaces with markers in an interesting way? And I don't think that this one is as successful as the first one that I did, but I mean, I'm trying some stuff. I think my struggle with markers is the fact that like you'll have a light shade of a color and then a shade that's way darker than that one, so it's hard to get like nice gradients and stuff. So where I think things get really interesting is when Kat tries to color in a page, and her style is very different from mine, which you will find out when this is done. But she actually has a legitimate art education. Like, she went to an art high school and an art university, and I just went to regular old high school, and I went to university for design, so I have a design degree, which isn't necessarily art. So while she's finishing that in, I'm working in tandem. I'm trying to see if I can do a marker portrait. So I want to be as safe as possible and do like my lines in pencil first so that I'm not messing it up. That, and we can't exactly color in the same coloring book at the same time. I kept telling her she colors like she paints, which is really interesting to me. We have such different styles, and it's super cool to see them on display adjacent to each other. I feel like she's really not afraid to go bold with her colors, and it really pays off in the end, where her image is just so rich and abides by proper lighting, whereas my image, by comparison, is just, I don't know, it just feels like a mess and it's kind of unfocused, whereas Kat's, it's rich. It's so rich. She blends her colors beautifully. There's cyan in there, but it doesn't look out of place. Like when I use cyan, it's kind of like, it's punchier, but it's so subtle. I love how she mixes her colors. Anyway, back to me because this is my channel, so I'm trying sorry, anyway, I'm going back to this portrait, and I'm being really conservative with how I'm approaching it. I'm very scared to dive in the same way that Kat has like dove in with her colors. I don't even really know why I did the outlines first. I feel like I just had to maybe create some definition with the features. As I'm building up some of the shadows, I'm starting super light, and I feel like this is a habit I've developed with pencils as well, where you have to sort of build things up, or at least that's how I've done it. I've seen people do pencil portraits where they're like shading right away. But none of that for me. I'm super timid and scared when it comes to starting a portrait, so I try to do everything super light, so in case I mess something up, there's still time to fix it. This is the scariest part for me, where I'm thinking, oh, I've got to be so delicate with these markers. I can't just go wild. And I catch myself doing that. I'm not being as loose as I'd like to be. And you know what? I think I'm a bit art tired. I did the card, the cat, and this all in the same session with no breaks. So I feel like I probably need to step away for a little bit. So here's the next day. I've let my brain rest a little bit, and I like jumping in at this point where the face is already kind of established. There's lights, there's shadows, and I feel like I can change it up a little bit. I can move on to the hair and make some more expressive marks and be a bit looser. At this point, I can sort of see it coming together. I realize that what's really gonna sell this portrait is the inclusion of some darker shades, and so that's what I'm trying to do. Still being a bit conservative, but that's gonna build up, and this is just how I do things. Even with acrylics, whatever medium, I tend to build things up slowly as opposed to going right into the details. Where I do like slowing down and going into the details are areas like the nose, mouth, and eyes, where those things can really affect an expression, and so I'd rather not get those things wrong. I feel like those things are what really anchor a portrait, so as long as you get those features right, then you can kind of go wild with other parts of the portrait and still have it look like a face. That's giving me some license to use some more gestury lines. I like to, in my head, I like to refer to them as like graffiti lines that look like they could be tags or hand styles but aren't. And I feel like I can thank high school for that, because I spent so much time just doodling in notebooks, various graffiti, and just practicing that look. And because these are filmed in real time, you can really see my hand jumping around and being more confident. It's not like at the start of the video where I was doing real small and intricate movements. Now that more of the portrait is coming through, I definitely feel more confident with just laying down bolder marks and being a bit more flowy and creative and not so precious with it. Another thing I like to do is some thinner squiggles. I feel like the contrast between thick and thin creates a lot of visual interest in an image. One thing I'm finding at the very end is I'm not super happy with the dark values, so I'm just going in with like an actual black marker. I usually try to avoid this when I'm painting, but for this case I want the features to really stand out. And last step is the trusty old white gel pen. I usually save this till the end, where I can add a few different kinds of marks, some highlights, and stuff to really tie the piece together.